Hello, and welcome to the Superintendent Effect, a podcast where we highlight strong leaders building strong communities. I'm Ann Brown, the president and CEO of the Cook Center for Human Connection. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by Dr. Andrea Norman, superintendent of the Carlsbad Unified School District in California. Thanks so much for being here. I think we all wish we were there. Is it warm and sunny in Carlsbad today?
It is for now. I hear the rain's coming in at 3, and then
Oh, okay.
everything goes sideways down in Southern California when it rains. We'll hang on to the good weather for as long as we can.
Well, I had a chance to be down there next to you in Oceanside a few weeks ago, and that's the most beautiful weather I've had all fall. So it'd be awesome to live in that all the time.
Oh, yeah. I can't complain.
So Andrea, tell me about you and your district.
Sure. I'm currently the superintendent. I came to Carlsbad in June. That's when I started. I was hired back in April after the superintendent assumed another role here in San Diego. So it was great because I was able to come over from a neighboring district and then also keep in touch with the outgoing superintendent who had a very successful run here. And so I was able to inherit a phenomenal school district. Carlsbad is located, if everybody knows where Legoland is, that's where Carlsbad is. We have about 11,000 students. We have a diverse population, a very high achieving population. We have a couple of Title I schools that receive additional federal aid. We are what's known as a basic aid district, which means we get the minimum amount from the state, and the rest of our funding is basically self-funded through our property taxes.
Okay.
And this is the first year that we're in basic aid. We had been in basic aid previously. This is basically if your property tax is higher than what the state would allocate you, then you switch over and you're basically funded through your property taxes rather than through the state. So I've been here for a few months. We're going into the holiday season. We definitely had a busy fall, but very successful. Just excited for everything that's ahead of us.
Wow. Well, tell me about your path to the superintendency. That's exciting to be in your first superintendent spot.
It
See.
is. And I didn't start off wanting to be a superintendent. I didn't even start off wanting to be an administrator. I came into teaching when the governor had implemented 20 to 1. So it was back in 96, 97 school year. And I started in LA Unified. I taught second, third, fourth, and fifth there. I had a fantastic principal who was my mentor. And after about a year or two, he figured out I was a leader in hiding. And I had been a leader in high school. Shocking. I was a student body president. I was junior class president, captain of different teams. So those traits kind of start to bubble up in your adulthood. And he said to me one day, I came to him and I was going to go get my master's because in teaching, you do get regular raises, but you can also increase your compensation by your education. So I wanted to go get my master's degree and I wanted to be a school psychologist. And he said, I think you'd be a great principal. You really get your paperwork done on time. And that was like the first thing he said. And I thought, is that the key to being a successful principal is paperwork? It is an important part of being a principal. I won't lie. He's the one that really helped me shift my mindset. And it wasn't about being the boss at all. It was really about how can you influence the educational experience of students and then also the experience of teachers in the workplace. So it was twofold. He really was great at taking care of teachers and making them feel valued, but he also always put students first. So he was really my first mentor and someone I really looked up to. And from there, I got my admin credential and went into being an assistant principal. So I had a more traditional path. I did a lot of the roles. So I did assistant principal for about 3 years. And then I became a principal. I switched over when we bought our first home. My husband and I got married and switched districts. And so I went from working in LA Unified in predominantly low income areas to more middle income, high income areas. And so it's really good to work in different environments so that you can see there's challenges wherever you go and they're just packaged a little differently, but children are children and they need strong adults to help them learn and grow. I did that and became principal. And then my husband and I started our family and I have 3 sons. And so I stayed a principal all through having my sons and hitting the hallmark of they're all in the same school. So once they were all in the same school, I was able to transition to district leadership. I have a doctorate in data and really looking at student achievement and the actions that principals take in order to really move the needle on student achievement and what do they do to work with their staff to make that happen and their families. So in a neighboring district, a directorship of assessment accountability opened and I entered into that and that was like my dream job. And I got to do that for about 3 months. And then there was a vacancy in the district for the director of elementary. So I was asked to take that on. So I did both jobs for a year. And then I just stayed in the role of director of elementary And then throughout that time, then I ended up taking on K-12 curriculum and instruction and worked in both areas. And I think that was really important. As administrators come up, it's important to look at your path and to make sure that you're getting a lot of different experiences, because I couldn't be a superintendent in a K-12 had I not had, for myself personally, I know other people have different paths. Had I not had that experience in the K-12 with the secondary realm. And
Right.
that really came from my colleague that I worked with and really having a great working partnership with him. And he had been a high school principal, he had been a director of high school, and he knew I really wanted to learn about it. He really it took meeting after meeting, and he would just invite me to things and tell me about how CTE works, how pathways work, how sections work, how master scheduling works. It's really important as you go through your career path to make those types of friendships, really, where people feel comfortable teaching you, but you also have to have a mindset that you're wanting to learn so that you can grow and become a more well-informed administrator. And so then from there, I was commuting quite a distance, and one of my sons was diagnosed with epilepsy. It's a very manageable situation, but I needed to be closer to home for him. And I put it out in the universe, and I got a job in Oceanside, which was just 25 minutes from my house. And I have the most beautiful commute, and it worked out beautifully. So I became actually the director of human resources. Okay. And it seems like a bit of a stretch to go from curriculum to human resources, but when you've been a principal, you've really worked a lot with your HR and understanding both certificated and classified. Mm-hmm. So I came into that role, and I had a wonderful mentor there again. And I really think it comes from having an attitude of gratitude and thinking, how can I learn from this person? How can I grow from what they already know? And then how can I contribute from my experiences? He actually was a great partner. I worked for him for about 1.5 years. And then when the CBO position was available, he really was someone who helped me be positioned to be able to take that on. And so I was appointed by the board to be the chief business officer, or it's also called the associate superintendent of business services. And when my superintendent asked me if I was interested, I said, well, I am, but to be honest, that was probably the one role I never thought I would do. The good thing is I had always followed budgets, and I was pretty good at understanding LCFF, and I had been part of the meetings when the LCFF calculator and the whole funding model was basically introduced. I think it was back in 2012, 2013. So I'd always been familiar with it, but I really didn't know the complexity of school budgets. And school budgets are complex, and yes, it takes years to learn it. And every time you think you know it, the law changes, and the next thing you know, you can't spend the money the way you could yesterday. So when she said, "Are you interested in the budget?" I thought, well, we should all be interested in the budget, but because it's what makes the school world go round. And I said I would, but at the time I was still paying off my student loan to get my doctorate. And I said, I cannot take on another payment. And she's like, we'll support you in this. And that was extremely generous of the district and really beneficial. And I stayed in that role for almost 5 years. And I did the CBO Academy, and I took the exam. So I'm a certified CBO, which is really, in terms of preparing me to be a superintendent, probably next to being a principal, really understanding that role, the best preparation for being a superintendent. Because if you understand funding, you understand how to make opportunities happen for your students and your staff.
I absolutely agree. I mean, what an amazing path. You have put in the work to get to the seat, because every one of those, I can just see where that's the exact right place to be to lead you towards the superintendency.
Thank you. It was really, it comes down to the people who surround you too. I feel very fortunate that I've had amazing mentors in my professional career that have stayed friends. We're really fortunate in education that it seems like it's a big world, but it's a really small world. Yeah. And to be able to have those relationships to draw on, so that when new legislation is released, I can call people from multiple districts and say, how are you figuring this out? What is your board saying? So that you have a lot of resources.
Well, it was great that you had that April to June time as well to be thinking about the position before you started. So in that time period, what was the best advice you were given, and what was the thing you were most worried about?
The best advice I was given in becoming a superintendent is number one, always keep students first. Our decisions need to be based on what's best for students always. The other advice in terms of the role of superintendent is to really make sure that you are working with your board collaboratively. and making sure that you're checking in with them regularly and that you have an ongoing communication with each and every one of them. And you really also have to learn the rules of what you can and can't share and how you navigate conversations to make sure that you're always in compliance. So I think the best advice I got was really understanding how to work with the board. I had a great superintendent I worked for, Dr. Julie Vitale. And then I also have worked for Dr. Andre Gray, and both have given me great advice on fostering relationships and making sure that you have strong relationships because the relationships are what you get you through the hardest times. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that the good times are good for everyone, but when times are hard, you lean on those relationships. So really emphasizing that. And Julie was really great when I was an associate superintendent. She would be very deliberate about saying, I'm doing this because, or I'm sharing this information because it will help us get to this goal that's for the board. And you always want to keep in mind what are the goals of the board. You as a superintendent can have all the goals you want, but they need to be in alignment with what are the goals of the board because your board represents your community and that's who you're here to serve.
Yeah, exactly. And probably as the CBO in your previous district, you had a fair amount of interaction with your board. I'm guessing here, but my guess would be that was where you became most familiar with boards and board relationships was in that CBO position.
Correct. It's really when you get at the cabinet level that you start to interact with your board more. I think I interacted with them quite a bit as well because I was the CBO during COVID.
Oh,
And
right.
that was a time that,
You had a
was
lot of
like any
communication.
other. Yeah. So we were always talking about what are we doing to work with our associations? How are we keeping everybody safe? And then also having a bond. So when you have a bond, you're always building projects, and every board member has different areas that are a priority. So my job was always to make sure when I'm talking to a board member, what project is it that they're probably focused on? Because there are certain schools that are in board members' areas or there's projects that throughout their career as a board member they've been interested in. It could be the Performing Arts Center, it could be an elementary school. So my job was also to know what are their interests going to be so that I was prepared when I would talk with them.
Yeah. Well, amazing experience to get you there. I know we first met when you were with Oceanside and you guys did some work with the Cook Center and brought in some of the resources from the Cook Center. And of course, we focus on mental health. So talk to me about why it was important to support the mental health of your students and what was what was happening around you, I guess, to even make you consider that.
Right. Even if there hadn't been COVID, COVID did put a spotlight on student mental health because of all the circumstances surrounding students at the time. So we wanted to make sure that as we brought students back and as we continued to get into the routine of school, that they were supported. And it's different in every community. There are some communities that naturally have more resources built in for different family units. And there's some families that will access those resources, and there's some families that won't. For example, like my family, we have insurance and we have social emotional supports that are built into what's provided. But there's a lot of families that don't have that.
Right.
And so it's having a level of awareness of what is it that our community has access to and what is it that our community needs access to. By having that available to them, then it's not forced on people, but what it is, it's an available resource that we can make sure that they know is available for them. And so that's what we were really looking at is coming out of COVID, what do our students need? Because when our students are in a better place and they're social emotionally regulated, then they perform in the classroom differently. And then that also impacts how the teachers experience their students. So everything has an effect on everyone else. So when our students are taken care of and our students can be regulated and feel safe in school and know that they're taken care of and their needs are met, then that directly translates to the experience of the student sitting next to them who maybe doesn't need those resources.
Right.
Because we all interact and we all influence one another. And then that changes the whole tone of the classroom. So by impacting maybe one or two students in the classroom, it can have a ripple effect throughout the classroom to have a very positive impact.
Yeah, well, I love that. And I think you're right. What your example of, some families have the resources and some don't. And so supplying those who don't. And even, some families who have the resources, they might find that for whatever reason, they would still like the anonymity and the accessibility of these resources being in their home. So, well, I'm so glad that we met over that and the great work that's happening. When you started in Carlsbad, what was one of the themes for your year or projects that you knew you were going to take on? What's something that you've started in your first, 4 months there?
Yeah, when I got here, when I arrived in Carlsbad, our theme is Elevate Every Learner,
Oh, I
and
love
then it extends to our administration as Elevate Every Leader. And so we're always looking at how can we take students who are already successful and help them achieve whatever their next goal is. For some, it might be academics. For some, it might be something social emotional. It could be athletics. It could be something in the VAPA. But what could we do to elevate every learner? And it's really I do think sometimes people just assume that high achieving school districts, everything's easy, but it's actually quite challenging because you have really high achieving students, and then you also have students who really need resources. And because your funding model isn't set up to provide as many resources, I'll give you an example. In Oceanside, the budget is over 300 million because you get supplemental and concentration funding to help provide additional services above and beyond. But when you go into a basic aid district, you don't get all of that funding. And until you're deep into basic aid, which means you've had years and years for your property taxes to go up and up above the LCFF, you really don't have a lot of resources. So
it.
one of our challenges was really how are we going to make sure every learner is elevated, not just the students who are already doing well. And so really looking at universal design for learning, also known as UDL, is how do we make our lessons accessible for all? And then looking at our MTSS structures and how are we making sure we're reaching every student, whether it's through tier one, tier two, or tier three supports.
Mm-hmm.
And then creating systems so that we're making sure students have access to it so that it's not too hard to get to tier two, but that it's appropriate for when tier two comes in to make sure that we are, for example, if the student potentially could have a learning disability, are we making sure we're going through all of the steps and providing the supports in place before we get to that point where we're needing to assess a student? Because a student is always a general education student first, and we want them to have the least restrictive environment at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. What would be some advice that you'd give to either an aspiring superintendent or a brand new superintendent in
The
your
advice I'd
form?
give to an aspiring superintendent is to take on whatever opportunity will make you grow. I
Yeah.
never thought I would be a CBO, and Julie giving me the opportunity to really push myself, it was the best thing I ever did. I had to take classes online for 16 months all through COVID to learn the ins and outs of the position, but you really learn it shoulder to shoulder with other people, whether you're talking to other CBOs or I work with consultants to really refine my budget. You learn a lot by working closely with people. So that would be the second thing, is to make sure you're developing relationships along the way. The goal of being a superintendent isn't to win some career race. It's really to build relationships along the way so that when you finally get there, you're not there alone, but you get to be there with all the people who helped you along the way, because you don't get to the role of superintendent because you always want to be the superstar. You get there because you collaborate with other people, you help them grow, and they help you grow. And that's the best part of it, is when you go to functions and you see lots of people and you can enjoy it because you've worked with them in ed services or you worked with them in HR, and you have this shared history that both brought you there. For example, I go to a superintendent's academy. That's the other thing I would say, is do the superintendent's academy and get to know other new superintendents. And so I went there, and there were a couple other people from my HR world. We were both HR directors, and now we're both superintendents. And
Wow.
it's to talk about our journey and how they got to where they were and how we got to where I am. And at one point, we were both together as directors. And that's why relationships are so important. It doesn't mean you're going to love everyone you work with, but it's important to be kind and respectful, because you never know when you're going to be in an academy with them or in a work group with them. And it's so nice when you already have that relationship to fall back on.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing advice, really. A couple of quick last questions. What's your proudest accomplishment at Carlsbad so far?
Well, having only been here for 4 months, I think one of the things I was most proud of happened last night.
Oh,
So we have a fantastic board here, very talented people. But what was really great about last night is we only have about 18 million unallocated bond dollars between our developer fee and bond dollars. I was most proud of how well the board worked together to look at all the options that were available, and we didn't have nearly enough money to do all the options, and how they strategically worked together and talked through and came up with priorities for the district. And I thought that was just a great representation of different parts of our community coming together and working together. I think it's a great example for our students and our staff of how really collaborating can come forward with a great plan moving forward. I was really proud of that last night. I thought that was terrific work. And everybody didn't agree all along the way, but we got to a great outcome. And that's really, to me, the best example of what collaboration is all about. And so I was really proud of that last night. And that was just something that really stood out to me.
Well, it sounds to me, even if they didn't all agree on everything, they could all agree on working for the greater good. And that's what a really healthy functioning board does. So great
Absolutely.
work
That's
on
who
that.
they
That's
are.
amazing. What's something people don't know about you?
Things probably don't know about me is I grew up in a rural community, riding horses and ATCs and all that fun stuff you did in the 80s. That was slightly dangerous, but it was great. I grew up going out to Glamis, and they might not know I'm part of a really big family, and most of them live here in San Diego. And that's the best part about working here. Also, is I can easily go see them after work, and family is. I think a lot of people know family is really my focus. And I've been really fortunate to have jobs where even when I was a principal, I only worked maybe 15 days more than my kids went to school. And I've always made their schedule a priority. For example, I love football. Two of my sons play football. I go to their games every week. And Carlsbad is also in CIF. And I'm so glad it's on a Tuesday so I can go see the Carlsbad game. But a funny story, when I first came to Carlsbad, everyone here is just so gracious. And Coach Mack gave me some Carlsbad swag to wear. And I came home, and I live in the neighboring community, and I had it. And my son, who's a senior, goes, "You can't wear that. You can't wear Carlsbad gear." I said, "Yes, I can. And yes, I will." I said, "Carlsbad is what makes our world go round. I love your team, sweetie, but I'm going to wear this every Friday." And so and my sons know that they're number one, but my job is also very important. My son also gave me a great compliment one day. He didn't realize it was a compliment, which is in true boy style. He said, "Mom, I never thought your job was that important because you were always around." And I
Oh,
thought, well, mission accomplished. I really,
yeah.
he goes, "I always just thought dad's job was more important because he just got home later. He was always working on holidays." And I thought that makes my heart so happy because that was always my goal is to be able to have a great career, but to also make sure my kids knew they were my priority.
Oh,
They still are.
yeah, that's wonderful. Is there anything else you want to add? Anything
I
great
think
and exciting you want to talk about?
Well, I want to give a shout out to the Carlsbad community. This community is amazing. I've met with most dignitaries from the city. I've met with staff. Everybody's taken time to be extremely welcoming. I've gone to all the school sites. I go look at our curriculum that's being taught in the classroom. It's rigorous from school to school. The pride working here in Carlsbad is unparalleled. So I do have to say, I feel so fortunate. Not all people get to work close to home and in a district like Carlsbad. And when I say I'm from Carlsbad, people are like, "Wow, that's awesome. Do you love it?" I love it every day. And they said, "Is
Oh,
it hard?" I said, "It is because we're here to give the very best to our students and our community every day. And it should be hard work. And I really enjoy it."
well, Carlsbad is so lucky to have you being their strong leader, building their strong community. And I'm honored that we got a chance to talk today. So thank you so much for being on the podcast and all the work you're doing for all the students in Carlsbad, and not just the students, but the staff. And I love when you said elevate every learner and elevate every leader, because really every adult position in your district is a leader. And
Mhm.
so they're just very lucky to have you. So thank you, Dr. Norman.
Thank you, Anne. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.